Welcome back to Real Talk with Dr. White. We so enjoyed the participants for the last episode that we had, episode number 1. This is episode number 2. The last one we dealt with the issue of why are young adults and youth leaving the church. I want to thank you, first of all, for your input. We learned a lot, and the podcast is still up. Please go ahead and chime in. Let us know. As I said, we're mostly gathering data, trying to understand and then share our understanding with others. And tonight, we're going to take another topic, which would somewhat intertwine with the previous topic. And this topic tonight, we're going to talk about the generational gap that is in the church. As you know, we are a amalgamation or collection of different ages in the church, but there seems to be a gap, this 20-year or 25-year gap that is existing within our church. And we want to address that tonight to say exactly how can we answer some of the questions, the whys, and maybe find some solutions. And we are looking again from you to chime in, give us your opinion, give us your input. We're not the experts here. We're just trying to formulate and tickle these topics. But remember, need to be very unapologetic and Christ-centered in our responses and our answers. So tonight, our topic, generational gap. I'd like to ask Dr. Williams, my co-host, to give us a little introduction in this topic that we're going to meddle into tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. White. So I think this topic is worth discussing, and I think there's no better persons to discuss this topic than two individuals representing different generations, you and I. And you can say between the both of us, there is truly a generational gap.
Wow.
I belong to the Gen Y group, or also known as the millennials, and you belong to the baby boomers.
Great.
So as you stated 2 weeks ago, we actually covered a very important topic, which surrounds this idea of the young adults leaving the church, and why they're leaving the church. And we concluded that a big or a major part of that is due to church hurt,
yes.
And who actually caused the church hurt, or who is causing the hurt. The second thing that we talked about was the challenges facing the modern church. And we put this in the context of the 5C framework: community, connection, communication, conflict, and compromise.
Yep.
But today, what we want to discuss is what we can do to remedy the issue of young adults leaving the church. And we have listed some solutions, and a couple of them resonate with our topic for today that we talked about 2 weeks ago. So we'll visit some of that today. But before we get started, Dr. White, I would like to start with defining generational gap.
What exactly is it? Awesome.
Okay.
Yep.
So generational gap reflects the ever-growing divide in church between the older and younger generations, often leading to the young adults leaving the church.
What age group are we talking about? I mean, I know you said baby boomers and Gen, but could you maybe break it down to decades, or 1 or 2 or 3 decades?
Absolutely. I actually had to look this up because I get them confused as well. So the baby boomers are between 1946 and 1964.
Yep.
If you're born within that time frame, you're a baby boomer. Then after the baby boomer, you have the Generation X.
Okay.
1965 to 1980.
Okay.
Then after Generation X, you have me, Generation Y, or millennials. And they were born between 1981 and 1996.
Oh, so almost 20-something years?
Between the baby boomer and the millennials?
Yeah. If we take the tail end to the other end, is about...
It's about a good 20, 25, years, 30-year gap.
Wow, that's...
Yeah. Well, when we talk about the young adults, the way it's defined, the Gen Zs really are actually what we would consider the young adults, believe it or not. And they were born between 1997 and 2012. So I kind of feel like the young adult really encapsulates the Gen Zs and the Gen Ys and the Gen Zs. So the millennials and the Gen Zs kind of fall into that category, in my opinion.
Thanks for that bit of information.
Absolutely. It's this group of people, 18 to 29,
right.
18 to 35-ish, that are leaving the church. And I think this divide, right, this generational gap that we're seeing, I think it's often centered around value systems, worship styles, cultural shifts, what is considered acceptable, and communication styles. You can say that there might be a war raging between tradition and customs, or between modernism and progressive. And so without a desire for an open dialogue that we're having today, we are going to continue to have this gap or this divide in the church, right? And as you said, the church has always been made up of every member of God's family, from the young to the old. So how do we learn to coexist and bridge this generational gap?
Right.
And I think we should address the fears the older generation is having. I think this will give us better insight into the resistance sometimes felt by the younger generation for change. And then we'll address the fears the younger generation has to give better insight into the resistance sometimes felt by the older generation for change. So I'll let you take on the challenge.
I guess you want to take the baby boomers on, right? I'll speak in the first person when I can, and of course the third person if I can. Well, I know for me or for us, some of the challenges that we have is first losing our culture. We were brought up, you mentioned that 50, 60 year span. The church practice certain liturgies.
Yeah.
A certain way we go to church, you dress up on Sundays or Saturdays. You heard about the Sunday best, as you keep saying for that day. They use, some of us spend the entire day at church. Some of us go morning or afternoon, and there's a certain way to how you sing certain songs. We are accustomed to hymns, and today we have more than we might want to call it secular music intertwined into religious music, and also just a way in where we worship a little more quiet, orderly, loving the organ versus the drum, that type of thing. And so for us, our culture is being eroded. And when that happens, we will fight back to try to hold on to that last piece of it to say, hey, we don't want to lose ourselves. But honestly, there needs to be compromise. There needs to be a level where we need to back off. And so that's the second fear, the fear of compromising. Some of us, we have challenges to pass on this baton. As in a relay, we need to pass it on to the next generation. Some of us hold on to it so long. You'll have leaders in the church that are in their 80s and 90s and just don't want to give up that position. I believe that is not healthy. We should start to process ourselves out as we gain a position within the church for longevity, and I would like to call it succession plan. Today we in a society where issues like race is very heavily gender, the sexuality and gender is something new for us. And nowadays a boy is a boy, a girl is a girl. But today we have to figure out how we're going to contend with that and different leadership in the church. So, and the other one, I believe, Doc, is that we don't want to become irrelevant, because if we're not used, then we feel like we're not important. We're put aside. We don't want to really play a supportive role. We want to play the leadership role, because the leadership role, we are in charge, and young adults follow what I say, that type of thing. And then last but not least is we don't want to lose control. So it's kind of come in a big ball. Losing control to us is the church is falling apart. We have to be there. That's why you have some adults, they believe they have to be at every meeting.
Yeah.
And they have to say, they have to have an opinion in every topic. And my joke is that at this point, I say, you can skip church one Sunday or one Sabbath, we won't, the church will miss you and the walls will still be there. But if we believe we do that, we're losing control. So for me, those are some of the four, I wouldn't say top, but some of the four important things. It's hard for us as young adults, baby boomers to let go. But let me hear from you, from your generation, since you have a little more insight on what's going on at that level. What are some of the fears that the young adults have against us?
Yeah, I like what you said about the fear of losing their culture, because I don't really think that a lot of us younger folks are so much against the kind of order of worship and sort of status quo and this traditional way of worshiping. But
Right.
I do think that sometimes it can come across as not being so authentic. I think when we keep the structure and order of worship without flexibility,
Mhm.
or without the option for change.
So the authenticity, is it
Mhm.
from the baby boomers or from the young adults? Where is the authenticity coming from?
I think the lack of authenticity is coming from that structure. So
Okay,
it's
got you. The
so
structure.
yeah.
Okay.
I want to elaborate on that because
Yes, please.
that's a great question you just asked. I think that when you are sort of you're sitting in the pews and you're watching what's going on up front, and you don't really have an opportunity to engage,
Hmm.
and to be a part of the service, then it can feel a bit sort of stale.
But don't we have youth programs in the church? Don't you go on and.
Yeah, activity doesn't really always translate to
Okay, got you.
authenticity. You see what I'm saying? You can have all of these things happening, but if
Right.
there's no real connection, which is one of the C's in our 5C framework,
Okay.
and part of that is doing church life together. I think that that's where you could sort of see there being a little bit of a gap. Um, the lack of small group interactions, I think,
Mhm.
can lead us to feel a bit disconnected.
Mhm.
And it can contribute to that lack of authenticity.
So you're saying that community, that belonging, that family,
Mhm.
it's what your generation is looking for within the
I
church.
think so. I think in part. I think for a lot of young adults, this kind of format of worship, all of the different things that we have to do,
Mm.
can sometimes feel a bit old and ancient and antiquated. And there's nothing wrong necessarily with being ancient, because sometimes being ancient is it often symbolizes wisdom. But I think the problem here is that because it's tradition, sometimes it can come across as if you change tradition, then somehow you're not holy
Not
enough.
holding.
You're not, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Whereas there should be an opportunity for there to be some flexibility, whether it is
And
having,
it's funny, this tradition was never in the first 400 years of the church.
we talked about it
This
before.
tradition actually came up later on, and it was practiced for, I guess, another from the fourth century to about the
All the
16th
way to
century.
yeah.
Yeah, where we find ourselves in this liturgy, this order, and somehow, believe it or not, we have it to the 21st century now. So I think it's a
Mhm.
way that, for me, and I'm stepping out on a limb here, maybe it's a way for God to say, let's get away from this straitjacket concept
Yeah,
of what we think church is. And really, church is a body of people that represents me, and we have different needs and desires and so forth. But go
yeah,
ahead, please.
yeah.
Go ahead on the Gen Z fears, please.
Absolutely. And I don't, again, like I said, I'm not, I mean, maybe I'm speaking for myself. I'm not opposed to the tradition.
Right.
I do like, and we'll talk a little bit about this later on when we talk about solutions or some of our experiences. I would like for there to be some flexibility. And I'll give you an example. We talked about this before, like when a few weeks ago, there was a service that I attended, and I just enjoyed the fact that we had this kind of small group interaction. It just felt very, fresh. It was very encouraging, insightful. And I suggested to a
Awesome.
very dear family member,
Yeah.
whom I love very much, that I would love for us to have something like this in place of the regular church service,
Oh,
where
wow.
where you could have both, because you can have an afternoon service where you can do small group discussion, but that's not as
How
effective
did
as
that
having
go?
it
How did
during.
that go? How did that go?
Um, I think overall, that individual, felt like it was a good idea, but I did sense a bit of a pushback initially, like, that's not how we do things. And
Wow.
then the individual went on to say, well, it's going to take a little bit of encouraging. You're going to have to bring people on board. You're going to have to do it
Wow.
slowly. You're going to have to help people shift their perspective a little bit because this is different. And I left thinking, wow, really? Like,
And for you, it's just snap, right?
yeah, I'm like, once every 6 months, once every quarter, like we can't just have something different. So for me, I feel like there is that gap, where I guess I don't really understand what the issue is, and maybe I'm not,
So
in church.
so it might not be communication gap then, because it
No,
seems like communication going across, but it's just this resistant.
I think it's a resistant to doing something different than what they are accustomed to doing at the 11 o'clock hour. Service starts at 11 o'clock,
Or
and
10 or 9, whatever, and
got
you
to
do
be
this and do
like
this.
this. So the idea of doing something a little bit different during that time, during that sacred time, it's like very sacred. Don't do anything else. It's it felt a bit interesting to me. So I think that is
So
an issue I think that we might face.
I think another one is judgment, right? Your
Mhm.
generation, fear of being
Fear of
judged.
judgment, yes,
Tell me
fear
a
of
little bit
judgment.
about that.
Well,
Because
I think depending on the cultural makeup of your church, you may be dealing with older members and their views on how you should present yourself, right? Like
mm,
how you should dress, or are you wearing jewelry or not, or do you have
mm,
tattoos in certain places that we can see? And certain behaviors may cause young adults to feel or be seen as an outcast, right?
right.
Let's say you have someone who's pregnant and they're unwedded. How do we deal with that? And I think a lot of young adults just don't want to have to put up with that. It's
So you
like,
tell me that a pregnant young lady coming into a church would be treated different from a non-pregnant young lady. That's what you're saying to me?
I've never seen it personally done, but I haven't been in that situation, but I have spoken to others who have been in that situation and
Okay.
they have felt, and maybe it's self-condemning, I don't know, but they have felt
Right.
a certain level of um,
Judgment.
disdain and judgment from others. And it doesn't have to necessarily be something that someone has said. Maybe the way they were welcomed, maybe it wasn't as as hospitable or as warm.
Mm.
But I think that a lot of young adults just don't even want to come because they're
So they,
afraid of being judged.
and,
And I go ahead.
no, and you mentioned tattoos. Again, having someone coming in later with how does a church accept that? I know
Yeah.
it's like acceptable in your generation, but for us, whoa, taboo.
Yeah.
But anyhow, go ahead. I'm so interested in this
It's
journey.
okay. It's okay. The third thing I would say is that I don't always feel like the messages are relevant.
Oh my. Oh my. Okay. Let's stop there. Time out.
Okay.
Messages that are not relevant. So give me a relevant topic. David slew Goliath.
You said what?
David slew Goliath. Is that relevant?
No, it's not, and it doesn't. It's not. No, that's not relevant. Okay. No, that's not relevant. But what I mean, some of these, revisiting Bible stories are great.
Right.
But when there isn't real life application, again, I think I said this 2 weeks ago when we talked about doing life with people. Young adults are going through a lot. We're living in a time, in a generation where we're just bombarded with all kinds of craziness, and we're looking for support. We're looking for encouragement, and the messages are not always providing that encouragement.
How would you advise someone that says to you that someone approach them of the opposite sex, the similar sex, and they're not interested? Would that be a relevant topic?
That would be a relevant topic.
Oh, and I'm not asking you to answer how would the church approach it, but I guess that would be a good message.
Yeah, it would be
a good topic.
It's relevant for what we're dealing with today. Absolutely.
Got it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
So that's the third one is just lack of relevance. And I think that also brings me to the fourth one, which is hypocrisy. I think a lack of genuineness, which is because I think some older members don't often see the discrepancies between what they do in church and their personal lives. And young adults are watching.
What about their past life?
Or their past life.
Right.
You want to act like everything was, all together when
I was born a Christian and I am going to die a Christian.
And I think, again, it goes back to the idea of authenticity. Church starts to feel like a place where you can live one way, and then when it's over, you can live a different way. And I think there should be no distinction between who you are at church and outside the four walls of a church building. So I think those are some of the core things that I see with the younger generation. Like you said, I'm happy to hear what other people have to say. But I think that those are some things that I have definitely encountered or I've seen.
And I think the genuineness come if a young adult shares something with you. That was once one of my situations. A young lady shared something with an older person, and I'm just going to exaggerate a little bit. Before the person got home, everyone else, about 5-6 more people, heard it. And by the time the young lady got back to church the following week, so again, we lose trust, we lose genuineness when credibility when a young person approaches us and tell us over. And believe it or not, even if the young person is the daughter or son of your good friend, you need to be able to keep that, as long as what the kid or the young person tells you is not detrimental to their health or their life. You should really be able to keep your mouth shut. Excuse me, that's the bottom line.
I agree.
The young person might come to you and say, hey, I tried hard and a guy, but I'm having sex outside of marriage and I'm struggling. It is not your place to bring that child to the board. It is not your place to tell that child's mother, father, anything. If the young man trusts you so much, your job is to have the confidence, to be honest and work with that individual through that trauma. And that's what I've seen happen a lot in the church, but on the flip side of it, we think we have never done anything wrong. But if you had to peel back our lifestyle, we have 3 kids with 4 different people. Okay. I'm being a little bit, but the point is, we have never sinned. I would never did anything that this young person. So that connection is necessary, where we have to be real, I think, to the young adults. And I try my best to do that. I don't try to go around to act as if I was this Christian from birth. I wasn't. I my challenges as a young man and going to school and so forth. If I said I drank, but does that make me a sinner? We have to be very careful with those things. But as we come to the middle part of the end part of our discussion today, one of the things that I think, in addition to this losing culture, how can we regain this gap? How can we close this gap? I think that's what we'd like to pivot at this point. I believe there's some things that we can do. For me, mentorship, and I'm glad what you said earlier in another meeting, that apprenticeship. I owe my entire Christian life to one person other than Jesus Christ, one person. And that person came into my life at a very delicate age. I was only 26 or 25. And that pastor more than mentored me. He apprenticed me. I mean, I was at his house every Wednesday. We met, I think, on Fridays. And then Sundays when we go to do visiting. And Saturdays we were in church together. At one point, folks used to call me his groupie, my wife and I. And I was very happy for that, because I learned everything to the point I actually have his entire mannerism in his ministry.
Wow.
And so that is where the connection for me was. I try to emulate that as much as I can to other young men and young women that comes around me, because we have to duplicate ourselves. I believe one of the solutions is to duplicate ourselves. He was open. He let me know his life, that he didn't start like this. He was a police officer before. He had his temper just like me, but the Lord changed his life and he became real. So he was no longer a pastor to me. He was a real father figure, a real person that I could actually touch. So I believe one of the first things, Doc, is to have that authenticity, to have an apprentice. Yeah. What do you think?
I agree with that. And I think that will, which leads me to the second solution, which is to have more young adult involvement.
Wow.
But I think you can't, you can't do that without having the willingness for the older generation to want to mentor and to serve as, a head, so that the younger ones can feel like they can enter into that apprenticeship role. But having young adults be more involved, I think, is important, because because then they feel connected. We keep going back to this word connection. They feel connected, they feel a part of. And that will help to also bridge that gap as well.
Okay. And the other thing I've realized too is multi-generational small groups. We have had those in the churches, but I've seen where either the older folks get together or the younger folks get together. Well, the younger folks get together, they were already together.
Yeah, that's
already together. So we have to be very deliberate and intentional to co-mingle the group. And so there can be that overlapping. I remember when I pastored, when I active in pastoring, I actually turned my average elders were about maybe 60 something. And there was only one young elder. And I intentionally said I wanted 5 to balance it out. And of course, initially it was a little fight, but the elders gave in. And I want to let you know that those young elders, we started them out as trainee and they went on to be full-fledged elders. And they managed and took the church to the next level. And of course, when you see younger folks in those leadership roles, other young people,
it's inviting.
Exactly, and generated, and they feel active and they want to play a part. So we had a very active young ministry, for lack of. But we have to intentionally intermingle them together and let them understand and create that history that they can look back and say, you know what, I remember brother so and so and sister so and so did this and did that. Thank God for my mother-in-law, lived with us for almost 18 years, and I learned a lot from her too. So I think that is valuable. We can reach back to the lineage of history where the grandparents and the parents, the community. So I think that's where we're going with this small group. And we had the church in a couple of first centuries had these small groups. And I think we get back to that. And it doesn't have to be structured. It can be loosely. It can be organic. Go ahead, Doc.
I think it might have to be structured in the beginning, which is why I said in place of having church, we can have once or twice a year. We can have everyone, because what other opportunities would we have? I mean, we have afternoon programs, but not everyone stays for an afternoon program. Young adults, sometimes they'll just leave, right? So you end up with less than half of the church at an afternoon program. But if you have everybody there, you can capture everybody there at 11 o'clock, then you can have this multi-generational small group discussion. And I think it would be right there, because they're all there. They're coming at 11 o'clock,
And then we as older folks, we must not feel, I want to use the word afraid, it could be another word, to invite younger folks over to the house.
Yes. My mother-in-law loves to do this. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, just invite them over, cook for them, have fun.
It allows for connection, community, right?
Let them watch television, and, I think those are some of the issues where we as older folks, lack of a better word, baby boomers, can take that lead into the area and solve some of these problems. Because at the end of the day, we're all going to the same heaven by God's grace. And each one of us need to support. The baby boomers need to support the younger ones. And the younger ones, exactly, need to support us, because we're in a world today of technology that you guys are way ahead of us. We have to learn from you. Let's talk a little bit about the last two topics: senior leadership, our junior leadership. What do you think about that, having juniors lead in the church?
I was going to say, this is great. This was a solution that was brought forth by one of the pastors at the, I don't want to take credit for this, Center for Preaching and Pastoral Leadership. One of the suggestions he made was have a young leader oversee senior ministry.
Wow.
I don't think I've ever seen that, but I think it would be profound. Because usually senior ministry in churches are usually ran by other seniors, right? Having a younger person actually lead out allows for that interaction to occur in an organic fashion, and it allows for conversation, dialogue to happen, and it helps with that idea of bringing more younger adults into the church. So I think that that's fantastic.
As you say that, I'm grinning because I got a call last week, late last week, one of my colleagues, friends for years. She was giving me a story about her 7-year-old granddaughter. They had this meeting. A new pastor came to the church. She had a meeting. The kid was there, and they were asking questions, and the 7-year-old piped up and gave a suggestion, which was what everyone looked at her like, that's great. It's a great suggestion. But guess what the pastor did? He didn't leave it there. He literally, the next Sabbath or next Saturday, whatever, they got to church, and he got up and announced, we have a new leader for the junior such and such.
Wow.
And he calls her name right there in the pulpit and said, you're the new leader. And they, they indoctrinated her as the deaconess. So she had to get up 7. They got a little and she's among them, talking and so. But I'm like, this is unbelievable creative. And a child shall lead them. That is what Jesus told. Because let's be honest with you, the prophet God called a lot of the prophets at a very young age to come forward. So
the disciples, you talked about this.
Disciples,
Disciples were young. They were teenagers. Early 20s. Yeah.
So I think can have 7-year-olds leaving everything, but I really think that deliberate context is having them in the center of our meetings, those 10 and 11 or 12, and even 7 at times, to lead out. And there's nothing wrong for them to make mistakes, and that's where we need to release that. They're going to make mistakes. As a matter of fact, you want them to make mistakes, because when they make mistakes, they learn from the mistakes.
Right.
So that's one of the areas I think we need to be deliberate.
And I think it's how they handle those mistakes. I don't think that, at least I can speak for myself, I don't mind being corrected, because I want to get better, I want to grow, and I want to serve God. But it's how you correct someone, that really, so we need to work on our approach with people. Are we doing it with a kind and loving spirit, or are we doing with one that's like condemnation?
Yeah. Well, I say for us as baby boomers, if you are not a friend of a young adult, do not approach them. Just don't.
Or if you don't have a relationship, like a real relationship with the young adult.
Don't tell them that the colors on their pants is too yellow or whatever. Literally don't do that. We'll be pushing them away. Have the relationship, make the connection, let them feel comfortable around you. And believe it or not, sometimes just being around you, they can know how to adapt and change.
Absolutely.
Just based on how you act. I've always said, if you have to tell everyone that you're a Christian, you're not.
Crickets.
Okay.
Christianity
is lived, not spoken.
There you go. That's what Christianity is all about.
So we're going to wrap up, Doc. This is great. The Bible, Hebrew 10, 24 and 25 said, let us consider one another in order to strive up with love and good works, not forsaking the assembly of ourselves together in this manner. So we need to come together. And Christ is not talking about older folks, younger folks. He's talking about everybody in this body of what we call Christianity, going in the same direction. And we have to give a little.
Yeah.
We just have to give a little in order to let the organic growth come forward. So I'll give you a few words, Doc, and I'm going to close off as we wind down to the last few minutes that we have here tonight. But
thank you. I think we have to remind ourselves what the goal of church is, which is to bring together individuals with the desire to serve God and to encourage each other on this journey by strengthening our faith individually and collectively, and encouraging one another and comforting one another. And so we have a lot of work to be done. We need to allow love to be the motivation in everything that we do, because, in the eyes of God, our love for people is doing good works.
Yes.
And that's ultimately what it means to be a Christian, is to serve God. And we can do that together collectively, bridging that gap, but we need to do it with a spirit of love, and we need to be open to having dialogue, conversation, be open to changing what may be traditional, but not necessarily salvific. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. That's nothing to do with salvation. No. So I want to challenge church leaders today, and any denomination, close your church on your worship day and let the baby boomers invite a few young adults over to their home and have church. Wouldn't that be beautiful? The doors of the church is closed for that. Well, let me do it right now. The building is closed for that day because the church is not the building. Okay, the building are the people. All right, so the
Mm-hmm.
building is closed, and you split up everyone, and they go to each other's home. You do your
Mm.
studies, you do your prayer, you have your meals, and you just enjoy the moment.
Beautiful.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Beautiful.
Oh, I would love to see that. And
Me
again, I
too.
want to thank you, Dr. Williams. This
Thank
has, for me, this has been an educational point. I'm looking for the comments to come in this week here, please. And if we see the need to do a part 2 of this, we will definitely do that. But for now, Dr. White and Dr. Williams, real talk. And looking forward to see you back. We go live on the 2nd and 4th of every Thursday at 8 p.m. And come and join us. Our next podcast will be on April 9th,
you.
and we're looking forward to see you. Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you.